Engineers. We represent Miranda Homes. We requested the tabling because we received the engineer's letter yesterday afternoon, and there's a few items on there that we want to address so that you have everything before you make any recommendations. But we wanted to come tonight just to present the plan and see if there's any further comments or questions that you have so that we can address those before next month. This is a project, it's called Frederick Farms PRD. It's located on the west side of Saxonburg Boulevard. It's the former Frederick Farm. It's the Frederick Estate right now. It's a 22-acre parcel. We're proposing 32 lots using the PRD ordinance. PRD ordinance allows 6 units per acre. We're only proposing about 1.5, so it's not a dense development. The ordinance will allow us to dedicate approximately 50% of the property to open space. So it's a nice bonus in using the PRD ordinance. It's pretty straightforward. Grading will be minimal. And take any questions you might have. It's pretty straightforward.
You want to go over Dan's letter?
Yeah, I just looked at Dan's letter for the first time because I hadn't been here. That's probably the longest letter I read in history.
The letter
I
includes.
can understand why you tabled.
Well, there's only 9 comments that pertain to tonight's tentative master plan. But Dan did us the favor of making comments for the final application, what we have to address for final, and for the subdivision plan and the saldo. The first 9 comments are the ones that we need to address before next month.
Okay.
And they're pretty simple and straightforward, but we didn't want to submit a response letter tonight and ask for consideration. It's just not enough time for you to look at.
You're saying his first 9 comments?
Yes. First 9 have to do with the PRD submission. After that, there's things that have to do with subdivision plan
Okay.
and final application,
So you're
etc.
talking B1 through, whatever, it's just letters change.
Through him?
Basically, it's everything under Article 4 plan residential development until you get to ordinance 391 subdivision plan.
Yeah.
I think that's what Pat is saying.
Yeah, steep slopes and slide prone areas, that's all subdivision land development.
You want me to go over this list of the preliminary plan, Dan?
Just very briefly.
Okay. What Dan Slagle has in his letter is under preliminary plan section 400.03 B1, provide a recorded plan for the proposed consolidation and re-subdivision, including total parcel area with existing lot area and proposed lot areas.
That has to do with the final subdivision application. That's
Okay, is that part of what you're saying you guys
the only
talked
ones
about?
we have to address. I assume we've got the same one. The section 401, C2, C11, and 409, A, all the way up to N.
This is why I don't play engineer.
Pat, maybe you want to just go over the things in the letter and, I'm sorry, Mr.
So why don't we skip this then?
Yeah, it's
If
just-
Dan gets in
it's
more, we're still
clarifications.
talking about this, maybe we can have him hit on a few key points.
Sure.
We can maybe turn it over to the planning commission to ask them questions or make comments.
Sure.
Can I start?
You may start.
Thank you. I do have some questions, Pat, about the application and the plan. And just for the record, I do appreciate this applicant agreeing to extend the time limits for the township to consider this. And at some point, I think the planning commission and staff need to have a conversation about how plans of this magnitude are presented to us and how much time we have to do. That's for another day.
Well, while you're bringing that up, or question for you, and I apologize to the planning commission. In my email, I was quoting multi-subdivisions and not PRDs. Is there any plans the MPC is ever going to change that 60 days, which is just, that's ridiculous.
No, I don't think that it will.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's hamstringing us in this whole process.
But
If I
typically,
could
again,
make a suggestion, a lot of municipalities have changed to application is due 30 days prior to planning commission meeting. So so that the engineer can review the application, get comments back to us in 2 weeks. We can make, address those comments before the next meeting.
Yeah, and-
Right now, your ordinance is just 10 days before, just everything's
2 weeks
crazy.
before.
Right,
2
and
weeks,
and
yeah.
my concern is a lot of places, and I know, or be correct me if I'm wrong, I know you can't force applicants to do this, but I think there ought to be a very strong encouragement for plans of this type to have a pre-application presentation to the planning commission. That's
Sure.
fairly standard in a lot of places. Now, you gotta be careful with that, because those are typically just discussions, although in public, they're not meant for the public to comment, it's really more for the applicant to talk to the planning commission, so the planning
Yeah.
commission has some idea what they're getting before they have to take action on it, so, I don't wanna belabor that, but that's something I think we should.
And we do have a
conversation about.
pre-application meeting, I'm sure you're aware of.
Yep.
It's handled through the engineer, myself, and their folks, applicant and engineer. So we do require a pre-application meeting, but you want like a workshop.
A workshop, exactly, thank you. All right, so my first question, and this may be directed both to Irv and to you, Pat, is we have to, although we are contemplating fairly significant changes to the PRD provisions of the ordinance, those aren't even close to being in the pending ordinance category. So we have to consider this under the provisions as they are now in the township code. And the purposes, as now described, for a PRD include creating variety of type, design, and arrangement of housing units, and better meeting modern housing demands, and better reflecting changes in technology and land development. I didn't see anything in your application that addressed those purposes, other than sort of some generic comments that this is in the best interest of the township. So
We'll
what sort of, let me ask the question this way, what sort of homes are you proposing here? Are they just your basic single-family home, or is there anything unique or?
Well, there's, I believe there's gonna be, attached dwellings
Attached?
and detached dwellings.
Okay,
And that's a good mix in a residential neighborhood. And that's it, but there's
Okay.
many different types of homes. It's gonna be very similar to the Heartwood Meadows Phase 4 and 5 that was approved a couple years ago.
okay. All right, I did want to make sure that you were at least considering different types of design and arrangements. I guess there's probably some question as to whether that statement applies for the township as a whole, as for a particular PRD, but.
Yeah, it's a pretty vague line.
I agree.
Okay.
All right, so my second question, this property is in the LDR zoning district,
Correct.
and would typically, in an LDR, if you were just doing a straight subdivision, you'd be required to meet a 1 acre minimum lot size requirement.
Correct.
So have you done any studies or analysis comparing what in theory could be developed under just as a straight subdivision under
That's what we
LDR?
looked at first.
Okay.
Yeah. And, it's being a 22 acre parcel and 1 acre minimum, would be less than 22 lots for sure.
Do you recall how many lots you would be able to get out of
We
it?
didn't finalize it because what we'd have to do is basically blow up the site, just turn it into a massive grading operation to make it work.
Okay. I would suggest that next month when you come back, you may want to have some details on that, because I think it's going to be important, given some of the history of PRDs in this municipality, that people understand why this is, use this in quotation marks, might be better than a regular subdivision. So I would just comment that might be something you want to
Right off the bat, Kevin, and when I, in front of planning commissions that have these, what I call still, sprawl ordinances with these massive lots, that you have to think about, municipalities have to think about the future costs of maintaining this infrastructure. And in the 21st century, I mean, just about everything I've done in my career, people in 20 years are gonna look back and say, what were you thinking? Because there's very few houses on the streets.
Yeah.
The tax base is much lower than it needs to be to really afford to top those roads and maintain those sewers in the future. That's the beauty of these PRD ordinances, is it allows you to save space and get the houses closer together, so you get more density on the roads.
I think just in terms of building your record, Pat,
Yeah.
I really do think it would be good, both for the planning commission, the supervisors, and the public to understand. Obviously, there are advantages to the developer for doing this. You're getting 32 houses of some sort on this property as opposed to probably 15. I'll make
Probably.
that number up, but something like that.
Right.
So you have more to sell, but on the other hand, you're preserving more, you're disturbing less land. I really think it would be a good idea for you to be able to present
Yeah,
that
we'll
graphically.
do that.
Okay.
I think what you're driving at is, we need to have some explanation of why this is beneficial to the
Right.
township and to its
Thank you.
residents by doing this as a PRD rather than as a straight subdivision.
Got it.
Yeah, not just say it's in the best interest. We
Right.
need, why is it in the best interest?
Thank
Got
you,
it.
Dan. That's exactly where I was going with that. I only have a couple of other questions, and they do relate primarily to some of the comments later on in Mr. Slagle's letter, so, I assume at some point we're gonna be asked to approve a subdivision plan, so I might as well at least get you thinking about them a little bit. There was a comment about identifying Pittsburgh red clay beds. Are there any on this property? Did you know?
None on the maps we saw, but
Okay.
we'll get that addressed.
Okay. So, I'm a little bit not concerned, but I do have questions about the amount and number of trees that apparently are gonna be removed from this property. 384 trees are gonna be taken down, is that
On
correct?
a 22-acre parcel, it's not tremendous, a lot of it's meadow
Okay.
currently. But we are paying considerable amount of monies to the township to mitigate that.
Okay. Have you plotted out any, where the larger specimen trees are and any steps to try to preserve them? I mean, if you're taking down a bunch of scrub, I'm not sure.
We have them, they're all right in the middle of roads and houses. Anything we can save, we've saved.
Okay. Mr. Slagle did not raise this, and maybe this is something that the township doesn't particularly care about, but section 506F of the Soldo requires that there be entrance trees. Do you have trees at the entrance here, or are you just keeping whatever's there?
We'll address whatever the seller
Okay.
requires during final plan.
Okay. My last question, for the moment, relates to the two cul-de-sacs. There's a 1,200-foot cul-de-sac length limit in the ordinance. How long are those two cul-de-sacs?
The cul-de-sacs are measured from the last intersection in a property.
Okay.
So this cul-de-sac here is 300 feet long, and this is 600 feet.
What's the distance, though, from that intersection back to where you go to the
This total
plant?
distance here is 1,300 feet.
Okay.
But the way PennDOT, and that's why everybody looks at it, measures cul-de-sacs is from that last intersection.
Okay, so what's the distance from Saks to the first intersection?
Yeah, that's what I'm.
It was like 1,100 feet.
That
Should
is
be about
1,100 feet.
Yes. Okay. Do we follow PennDOT's rules in terms of measuring cul-de-sacs? Okay. Okay. All right. I don't think about anything else at this point. I think that's it for now. I do appreciate the applicant being willing to extend the time for reviewing this, because I think it's good that we have a more intelligent discussion. So I'm done.
It always has to start somewhere, and my thing to Irv was, it'd be nice if the MPC
Yeah.
at least gave 90 days on a PRD 60. I don't understand why they do that.
Good, Peter.
Yeah, I think Kevin covered my question. I would just note, even though, as Kevin said, we just have a pending changes to the PRD ordinance, I'm encouraged that, the site's 22 acres overall. We're probably gonna increase the minimum to 20 acres under our amendments, so. And also on the, open space, you're at 50%, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's well above where,
Yeah, the grading, just the topography on the site, compared to 95% of what I'm involved in, this is great. Most plants have huge cut slopes and fill slopes. This is gonna be a nice pretty nice plant.
I have a couple questions. On your narrative, right in the first paragraph, you say PRD will disturb 78% of the site. think just a few minutes ago you said by doing a PRD, you wouldn't disturb them.
Well, it's,
What do you mean by disturb, maybe? That's.
well, we have to do these environmental features, these rain gardens around the site, and we've got to grade those in. That's included in the 78% figure, but those are part of the open space.
Okay,
So it's whatever, 80% of the site has to be touched, but actually developed for homes and such is under 50, or about 50.
and I was looking at your map, and obviously the copy we have is kind of hard to read because the lines tend to be pretty close together. But I was looking at the layout here, and I think you've laid out a 25-foot buffer around the edge.
Yes.
But where you get down here by lot 101 and 132, does that buffer extend across those lots? Yes, I can't read, I see a line there, but I'm not sure if that's the buffer.
Which line?
Right there at the
101,
entrance, on each side of the road, 101 and 132.
Yeah, Pat, you have to hold the 25-foot perimeter buffer for the.
Yeah, minor grading to get the road in and grade that.
Okay, but you have the buffer as part of those lots or outside those lots?
It's the buffer yard is on the lots. I mean, that's a common way to do it.
So what you're
But
saying,
they
what you're
can't do
saying is
anything.
the lot includes the buffer.
Yes.
Herb, does that give us a big problem? I know you also have some of the other lots that have the same situation, because at some point in time, the owner says, I own this property, I wanna do something with it.
Well, they have setbacks there, have to adhere to.
I
They're
know,
gonna have two
but-
front yard
but,
setbacks.
You know,
on
what
two
if the
lots.
owner wants to, put a shed on it?
You still
You know,
have
and
to- you still have to-
20, 30 years from now, who's
Talking
gonna
about the
even think
buffer
about
along
that?
Saxonburg Boulevard?
On those two
Well,
lots.
Saxford Boulevard, but also back on lots 113, 112, and I think 105. Also extend into the lot itself is shown as extending into the buffer. Yeah,
That's common practice, because the recorded plan is going to show the buffer yard and state that there's no development can occur.
well, I understand that, and that's very good, but, 20, 30, 40 years from now, no one's gonna look at that recorded plan. Some homeowner's gonna buy that property, he's like, I wanna put a shed back there for my lawn equipment.
Well,
And I don't even
the other
know
way,
if anybody here at the township at that time would even think about that.
the other,
Especially if they don't need to get a building permit, it wouldn't even be
But this
addressed.
whole discussion started on two lots on Saxonburg Boulevard. They would have to adhere to setbacks there.
Yeah, okay, that's fine, but I'm worried about these other lots. I don't really like the idea of having a
Lots in the buffer.
private lot extend into the buffer zone. Cause then you get,
Pat, can that be
the
adjusted?
contention between the property owner who's saying, that's my property, I wanna do something, I wanna do what I want with it. We're saying, no, you can't, because it's a buffer.
We can adjust that. There might be a couple places where it would affect building setback lines. If we put that area within the open space, that might harm the lots as far as setback lines. So we would have to look at that. We'll look at it
Yeah,
before next month.
I prefer if you didn't put a lot in the buffer zone.
Yeah, we'll look into that before next month's meeting.
the other.
Now, the ones at the entrance on Saxonburg, I don't have such a strong feeling on that, as long as there's gonna be some kind of landscaping there, I would presume.
I'm sure.
The other thing we could do, I think, is or suggest as a condition of approval that, that restriction on building, on no building in the buffer area, be expressed in the deeds and in the declaration of covenants, particularly if it's in the deeds for those particular lots, that will put everybody
Certainly
on
that
notice.
would control.
It makes it a little,
Yeah, more apparent.
Legally, that would-
assuming somebody has a smart attorney who will actually read the deeds.
So that's what title insurance companies are for.
And as far as, the contour lines here are very close together on this, and I'm sure they're much, how steep are the slopes here in the common open area?
Well, the slopes up here from the northern side is probably 15 to 20%, I believe. Over by the stream is steep. Right by the stream, that's a bluff. It's very sloped. This is pretty flat back here,
Uh-huh,
steep against the stream again, the stream bank.
so you got a varied.
Right.
And what's your target audience? Is it family with kids or empty nesters or?
Grant Miller's here from Miranda Homes.
I'm Grant Miller with Miranda. Thanks for having me. I printed out a pamphlet. It's very similar to what we're offering at Heartwood Meadows. If you would all like a copy, it shows what we're offering there, the starting price. And then I can email you guys the full floor plans if you're interested. The only thing that will be different about this plan is that we have a couple of high side lots in this. So we will be offering like one or two variations of an integral product.
Grant, are there any price points on there as well?
There are, yep.
And for the audience's benefit, what's your price point?
Low 5s to high 7s. I think most of our sale prices in Heartwood right now are between the 700 to 800 range.
On the multi-disc, I saw your, is that the model? I'm pretty sure it was with your plan.
It could have been the model unless we sold it already. Usually someone will buy that model fairly quickly.
And it was listed at, I think, 750,000.
That may have been it. I believe we built a spec there as well.
Okay.
So I'm unsure exactly.
But routinely, how models go is you may sell that to someone, but then you pay them rent basically.
Exactly, yep,
Yeah.
yep. You got it.
Especially, but you're basically aiming this at families?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Mostly family
I think
buyers, yep.
You need to look into possibly having something at the entranceway for like pool loss, cause you know.
Yeah, we have
the parents are gonna drive the kids to the bus, to the
Certainly,
bus stop
yep.
and park.
It's tough to see on your plan, but we've got a pull off here for 3 cars,
Just 3?
only 32 lots.
It's 50 feet.
You might wanna consider making a few more extra parking spaces, because we've run into problems with other plans where parents park and they're blocking the entrance, basically.
We talked about this in pre-app, that's why they bumped them back to what they are. But we can talk further.
So what we suggested was, is that in Richmond Estates, there's 7 parking spaces, 97 lots, so proportionally, 3 is about.
Reasonably.
I'm just saying that that's the rationale we used when we were having
Okay.
our original discussion. If
Because
you want more-
I'm sure the township's gonna put no parking signs up at the entrance. So you have to have parking spaces. And some of the residents get a little upset when the police come by and ask them to move their cars or else I have to get a ticket.
Could you put a smaller pull out on the other side? So-
I'm hoping with a 1,100-foot walk that not too many kids will be picked up.
You're funny, Pat.
I've seen, there's a plan near me and every morning, didn't matter, they're the first house in the plan or the farthest house, they drive the kids to the bus stop.
So, I apologize, I actually do have 2 other questions, which some of these conversations prompted. So, the stormwater, those are rain gardens?
Infiltration, detention, rain gardens.
Okay, in which direction do they drain? Where
All
does the
drain-
water go?
They all drain towards the
Stream.
The stream is right here
Yeah,
and down here. They will all drain 2
Okay.
streams.
okay, so basically they drain towards the bottom of that plan? I mean,
To the,
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
got it. And where does this sit? I drove down Saxonburg to get here tonight. Where does this sit relative to those, high-tension power lines that are running around there?
right here.
Okay,
It's right against the property line.
okay, okay,
And Miranda has agreed, the land underneath here is owned by the Rachel Carson Conservancy Group.
okay,
Miranda has granted them an easement. They wanna get a walking trail throughout the township,
okay.
and it will be underneath the power line, and there's gonna be a walking trail that connects it to this point.
Okay.
In return, they're granting us an easement to connect their sanitary sewer into the public sewer.
Okay.
Why do you need, an easement to get to the public sewer? Because there's a pump station on that flat part of the far right side.
The pump station is above us,
Okay, it's not right next to your line? Right there?
It's right there.
Okay.
And it's just, that section there, we need an easement.
Okay, looking at the map, I would've guessed the pump station was right along that old line right there.
Right there.
Okay.
And you've, the township has determined we don't need any particular traffic studies for this?
It's 32 lots, so a traffic study would be required, correct, Dan?
We need to get an HOP.
From,
PennDOT.
from PennDOT?
Yeah, to make a cut.
Is Saxonburg's a state road?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The site distances are okay there? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's
not-
already, we've already,
Okay.
we actually slid the drive to get the site distance.
Okay.
And once you tear down that old house, that'll be a big improvement.
It's the old Douglas estate, 3 acres.
Anybody else have any comments or questions here? Dan, is there anything on your report that you'd like to run through, touch on?
We requested retable.
Okay. Yeah, what I was gonna say is that, I heard a lot of the discussion, not a lot of it, some of it, sorry for being late there was, what's it called, Rolling Thunder?
We know what you're up to.
Well, I got a chance to see, our vice president, as she went by, but,
20
anyways.
miles an hour.
Yeah, she was out the skyway. Anyways, I heard a lot of the discussion and a lot of it came out of, I think, out of the letter that I produced. And at this point, I could easily go through a 6-page letter, but I think at this point you have the letter. I think you know a lot of the items that are of interest to the planning commission. What I would encourage you to do is during the next 30 days, before the next planning commission, you're more than welcome to shoot me a set of revised plans a couple times. You're more than welcome to come to my office and sit down and we can redline it together as to what I'm looking at, so that I don't have to write 6-page letters, because that's something I really don't
Correct.
like to do.
Yeah, we
So-
talked before you got here, the first 9 have to do with this application. And then there's, you kind of gave us the roadmap for when we make subdivision and land development applications here too. We're gonna show you, how we're gonna meet that. We're gonna explain in letter form, but we're not gonna provide the final subdivision plans nor the land development.
Well, again, the intent of a lot of these comments, although some of them are broken into tentative and final, but what I need to know is enough that I feel comfortable that your plan is viable.
Yeah.
In other words, I need the sewer service availability letter. I need a water service availability letter to let me know that they're willing to put utilities into your plan.
Yes.
I need those things to make sure that.
Yeah, everybody is here and available. We always get connections, but we will request those letters.
Yeah, I need proof. What's it, trust but verify?
Yeah.
No worries.
Are we we're not anticipating any requests for waivers or modifications with this, are we?
I'm not, no.
Okay.
We don't see anything.
Okay.
One final question, I can't tell on my plan, but are there sidewalks in this plan?
Yes,
Both sides.
Both sides, all the way out to Saxonburg?
yes.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, and
Appreciate your time.
so I guess we can table this till next month?
Do we need,
Well,
trying to
good, Kevin's gonna hit it here. So a sample letter was produced by Irv.
They already talked about that, they signed the extension letter.
Okay. So the answer is no. It's taken care of.
So you can do a motion to table for the next meeting.
okay.
Okay,
Move we table this till our October meeting.
do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries unanimously.
Who was the second, please?
Kevin and Peter. Okay. The next item on the, is there any comment from the audience on this we just discussed?
I have questions about the plan, certainly.
Identify yourself. almost forgot about that.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Peter Nigra. I
Where
live,
do you live, Peter?
He doesn't have to say his address.
Pardon?
He doesn't have to say his address.
I'm
To
asking
him,
him to.
is it required,
I-
I asked him where he lived, which was,
Okay. I'm just-
maybe to be correct, understanding where he lives relative to the plan to help him understand.
Right. But I'm
Certainly,
just
he didn't-
letting
if
him
he
know.
didn't, he's not, if he decided not to, he could say, I don't wanna tell you where I live, but Mr. Dunn, it's up to you.
that's okay. I'm comfortable sharing that.
Some people don't.
Right here.
Okay.
So,
Right there being across the street.
yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, directly across the street. So, and that kind of relates to some of the questions, so I appreciate, Dan, your comments about the buffer zone. That's important to me, whether these lots are actually in the buffer zone, because that would be right across from my, property. But just, one of the questions, are there going to be streetlights involved in this? So that we have any issue with light pollution based on streetlights rather than just home lights?
You mean lamps, not signals. Whatever the township requires will be constructed, but it would be within the plan, with lights going down.
It's very possible, the police might ask to have a street light put in at the intersection.
Whatever the township wants.
Any exterior lighting in the plan itself is gonna have to be shielded, so it doesn't have the
So
light
because your
pollution.
plan does not exceed 50 lots, lighting is not required. It may be requested, but it's not required. But I think what you should be asking a little bit about is each one of these houses obviously is gonna have a porch light.
Mm.
So I think what everybody's saying here is that it's important that those lighting on the house and things like that get shielded. And that's something that could be addressed in the homeowners association agreement.
Okay. Do you plan on requesting street light? I mean, you know, they may not be required, but they may be requested. Do you plan on making that request?
No.
Okay. Where is the entry cut as relates to, have you considered my driveway, I guess is my question. Is this thing, we talked about pool offs for parents for schools. Is this gonna be directly across from my driveway, or is this gonna be offset?
Where is your driveway? Where's the farmhouses?
Mm-hmm. So this is my property. My driveway comes down in this area.
Your driveway is up here. That's probably 300 feet.
It comes, so Little Pine Creek crosses Saxonburg Boulevard. My driveway comes right here. So you're offset, so.
Yeah, probably 150 feet.
I do wanna just express to the commission same concern about parking at the entrance, and that would be a particular concern for me. I know I'm just one person, but, if we have a jam up in that area, that's gonna be, a problem for me. Other than that, I mean, I think, I don't really have any other questions at this point. I'd like to just see the plans and Mr. Slagle's letter. Are those available to me to review?
Mr. Cooper, you've no objection to that, do you?
It's great. Okay, thanks very much.
I get them from, you have to come to the township and file a request, but don't grant, there's a form you fill out that you want it, they'll hand it to you, then you can look at it.
Perfect.
According, and Mr. Cooper's representing that you can make, if you want to, buy copies, you can do that. There's a cost of making copies of those plans, but if you just want to review them, you can certainly do that anyway.
That's great.
Please come back next month.
Oh, I will. Thank you.
Anybody else? Chris?
Chris Capone, 3606 Windsor. You guys did a good job. You ticked off a lot of things on my list already. There's like a few comments. On the buffer zone, there's one thing that may sort of be the source of all the confusion is I noticed on the plans, it's marked as a perimeter setback. It's not called a buffer zone, right? So it's sort of treated as a setback for building, whereas I think in our Saldo, it's really a true buffer where you can't do anything in it. So I think that does need to be cleaned up, like in Hartwood Meadows, with the phase 4 and phase 5. The buffer zone is a separate property owned by the HOA. It's not encroached upon by any of the lots, whereas in this, I see, you know, as you pointed out, Mr. Taylor, a lot of lots do overlie that. I also noticed there were some drainage features along the top edge that run through the buffer. So it looks like there's gonna be excavating and, drainage.
Yes.
Is that permitted? I thought the buffer zone was,
That's permitted. I mean, water runs downhill, we can't stop it.
I think, Chris, Dan, didn't you raise a question about that in your letter? I thought you said that if they disturb the buffer area, they've got to do some remediation.
Right.
okay. I thought the purpose of the buffer area was to prevent any
Well, that
disturbance.
particular buffer, Chris, it's already bare.
Okay, all right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, is it already mostly bare along that, portion of the, power lines?
So in that map, it's the top
Portion
left
of-
corner of the
Portion
top
of
map.
it is, but, not all of it. But we, like with Hartwood Meadows, if we touch anything in the buffer area, we've got to replant.
I think there was already, mentioned, it'd be nice to see where the replacement trees would go, like we touched on that. You asked about the sidewalks. I do wanna reiterate the pool over, I did notice on the drawings, it was on there, I measured about like 50 feet. I can tell you in Hartwood Meadows, like the bus stop, the elementary bus stops in 2 places. One's at the corner of Lenox and Westchester. And that intersection is not unusual to see 5 or 6 cars sitting there, you know, in the afternoon waiting to pick kids up. And that's only for like, I don't know, 20 some houses that use that bus stop. And it does get choked, you know, the street's only 25 feet wide, and you see people parked on both sides of the street. So again, to reiterate, you know, I think it's great that you put that in, that you thought about it. I just question about whether that's really gonna be big enough for that particular development. I don't know if I can address you directly, but I was wondering about the trail access. I thought the same things. I think it's great that you were providing trail access. Can you clarify that? I didn't completely follow what you said in terms of like where would the access be for like the public?
So Rachel Carson owns this strip
Yes.
here,
Yes.
and we've got a trail design that comes down, I believe, around here.
Oh, so
Is
it
that the last
enters
one?
at Saxonburg?
We gave them 3 options, but
Yeah.
I think it's gonna come down to here.
Okay. All right.
What's the composition of that trail? Is it gravel, asphalt?
It'll just be a wood chip trail.
Wood chips?
That's what we recommend, so that's good.
I was wondering if it'd be feasible to have access in between lots 105 and these, like in here somewhere?
We had proposed one right here.
Okay.
They decided to go with,
Okay, so that's what they said, yeah, because I noticed you did have substantial areas that were not buildable for other reasons that might.
Pat, we're gonna have the option for them to come in off that top part as well.
oh, so 2
Yeah.
places.
Yeah.
Oh, so you have
Yeah.
two.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
So I feel like I'm
Um,
telling my children that they have to have an antecedent before a pronoun. Who's they in that conversation? Rachel Carson?
Rachel Carson Trails,
Conservancy Group,
correct.
and their main goal is getting trails constructed in this area.
I didn't know if you were
That's-
talking, I didn't know if you meant you were talking to them, to the adjacent property owner, or whomever, I just wanted to figure out who they was.
They actually own that fee,
Okay.
it's like a bowling alley shaped parcel underneath the power line.
Okay.
Yeah, it's directly underneath the power lines, for your high tension.
This is most of the trail, to be honest.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like, no one can do anything else, but you can't walk underneath it. And actually, we had inadvertently wound up with one in Hartwood Meadows
Right.
when they put in the gravel roads for the stormwater ponds. One of them, you know, runs underneath the power lines. Last question, again, it's not an objection of any sort, it's just sort of a question. There's 4 stormwater ponds. This might be a question for you, Mr. Slade. Was that a concern with just the future maintenance costs to township? I mean, this is 32 lots and you have,
If I could jump in here.
yeah.
This is a DEP requirement. They are pushing for more basins to serve smaller areas.
Okay.
We've actually
I was thinking the
fought
opposite.
them on it for that same reason, but
Just from a maintenance standpoint, it's like, well, if you have one big one, that'd be easier than, because each of these has to be fenced, I presume, or not?
I don't think so, but it's.
I guess if
each
they're
one-
shallow enough, they don't.
The
need to fence.
developer has to pay the township $16,000 per for each one.
Are these rain gardens or detention?
They're detention slash infiltration. The final design is,
So will they always, I guess the distinction is, will they always have water in them? Or
No.
is it gonna, okay. So they really will function as rain gardens then?
yeah,
Okay.
rain garden's a pretty broad term.
So Mr. Slagle wants 8 of them to boost up the, income for the township.
It's not my doing, it's DEP.
No, it just struck me that I'm, you know, it seems like a much smaller development, I'm comparing to like, you know, the ones in progress, you know, 3,000 feet away, you have more detention ponds with fewer acreage, it seems.
We are with you 100%. We're taking down trees to create these environmental features.
That's weird.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Anybody else? Okay, if not, we're moving on. Next item is the revisions to the PRD section of Township zoning ordinance. I have a new copy in front of us. Before we get down into the meat of the matter, though, I'd like to kind of just run through and make a few typo corrections. I think Jackie, I may have sent these to you, but I just want to put it up to the rest of the members and stuff. On page 1, introduction, we need to put A in there, it should be A planned residential development. Start the sentence. On page 2, C, permitted uses. In the next to the last line in that paragraph, toward the end, are the words "are met," they need to be deleted.
Oh, yeah.
Were you at Dan?
Page 2, C.
Okay.
Okay. And on table 4A, I don't know why, but under LDR quad townhouses, we deleted that a long time ago. Is it on table 4B, it says not permitted, so just need to get them in sync.
I'm sorry, Mr. You said under LDR in what? No?
Instead of 3, it should be not permitted.
Thanks.
Right. Is that what you're-
Right, not permitted. On page 7, I, roads. Right in the middle of that paragraph, it says every single-family dwelling unit. I think we want to eliminate single family, it should be every dwelling unit. And I just want to make a comment on page 9, where we talk about, on item number 3, where we talk about 6-inch DBH. In the Saldo, it uses 8-inch. I think we need to consider, I think we want to have some consistency between the two ordinances.
And that same comment is back on page 8.
Yeah,
Same
I know
comment,
it's
number
in here
2.
a couple of places, I just marked the one. On page 10, item number 12, the second line at the end, it's where it says of the, that should be replaced with and, location and with. And I think that might have been it. I think that was it. So now we can get into the meat of the matter.
Can we, before we go, I think we're still hung up, maybe we're not, but still the substantive issue we need to consider, I think, is the density still, correct?
Yep.
Before we get to that though, I would like to have a brief discussion about the tree, tree circumference DBH point
Okay.
you just raised. I recognize that the Saldo says 8 inches, but I think the PRD provisions can supersede that. And if the point of the PRD is to be more, how do I want to say this, more aggressive about preserving natural features and things like trees than an ordinary subdivision, then I think the 6 inches should be the standard for the PRD.
What's the rest of the board, planning commission think? I mean, I just felt it should be consistent, but, you know, you're right, we can make it more strict in the PRD.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, is that a good idea to make it more strict?
Well, again, my argument would be, it is because the point of the PRD is that you want to better preserve what we have than would be done under a normal subdivision. And 6 inches versus 8 inches, you know, that's a couple of years of tree growth you're saving, so I think that's worth preserving.
I can tell you the reason why we formulated it the way that we did was because we're now assessing a fee for reforestation of trees in other areas of the township. And in talking with legal counsel about this too, is that there comes a point where it will be challenged. And when you start expanding that, there comes a point when it may go away.
Anybody else have any thoughts?
So the point there is that if we go to 6 inches, we're open to legal challenge, that would be
No,
likely to succeed.
I didn't say that. What I'm saying is that, the question is that right now, the way that the formula is calculated, the Conservation and Environmental Fund fee is roughly around, let's just say, 80,000 to 100,000-ish. And there comes a threshold when it might be advantageous to hire a lawyer.
Well, except that the developer would have to, what's the developer's argument there? It's gonna cost me more because I have to preserve more trees? Sorry. I've tried to make arguments like that, and they don't get very far.
Where in any other municipality has this been utilized?
Dan, I don't know that we need to worry about other municipalities. I think we ought to worry about what's best for Indiana Township.
Okay. I'm just saying that there's gonna be a threshold, and there's gonna be a point at which time that it will be challenged.
Yeah.
And then it goes away.
I think my feeling is, I like the concept of PRDs because it preserves open space. And if this were to become a decision point for a developer, whether to go to PRD or make a cookie cutter standard development, I'd hate to see it go standard development wise. I prefer going PRD.
Well, as long as they're getting increased density, I think the developers will make that trade.
Well, that's something else I wanna talk about
Maybe
here.
the two need to be considered together, but,
Yeah, I guess the question is what the total cost is, and when you think of the total cost of development, is it minuscule or is it significant? And where's that break-even point? As it becomes significant, then we're gonna have a problem.
I wish Pat was still there. Sure, that's not the 6 inch trees they have.
Anybody else have any thoughts? Leave it the way it is, or should we make a change? Or you wanna think about it? I know we have a new face on the board.
Question is, do you talk about all types of trees, or do you talk about like a scrub tree that's 8 inches? Do you have to keep that scrub tree?
It
Or
says
is
8 inches.
Okay, it's just 8 inches. I would go with the way that the standard is today,
In the South, I would say.
the 8 inch and not the 6 inch. That's my opinion, sorry.
I guess to get a pine tree to 6 inches doesn't take very
Doesn't
many
take
years, does it?
No, it doesn't.
And that can only be like a 8-foot tall tree that could be scraggly as all heck. I guess I'd be leaning toward 8 inches. That'd be my side.
And if we can come to a decision on this, then I think it would be good, but I would go to 8 inches too, I think.
Well, I'll file a dissenting opinion and go with the rest of the board, that's fine.
Okay, I'll make a motion, we change it to 8 inches. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Is it 4 to 1? I didn't hear an I down this way.
Oh, I had an eye.
Okay.
I know.
Go with 8 inches. Okay, let's get to the meat of the matter. I think we're talking about table 4A.
Can I add a couple things?
Sure.
So, as we discussed at the last planning commission meeting, I went back and did like what I would call a beta testing of, I guess, where we're going at this point. So I passed down a chart, and to kind of make it, I don't wanna say the word fair, but to make sure that everybody's on the same page, I asked one of my engineers who is totally unfamiliar with what we're doing here with this PRD ordinance. And I asked him, here's the ordinance, please, take a couple different plans that we've done and to just take a look at it and run with it. So what he did was he took, as Dan started off with, table 4A. And if you look at in these columns, the one that's new PRD with no deduction. So the way he interpreted the sentence up above as allowable net density specified in table 4A. So he took that number times the acreage of the plan. So let's say that Richmond Estates was 38.9 acres, and that's an MDR district. So he multiplied that by 2.5 and said, okay, the allowable units that are in that particular plan is 97. So that's the way he read it, and that's the way he gave me the graph. So in each one of these plans, Richmond, let's just use Richmond Estates. So that would be 97. Then the other, I guess, way that it gets horned into is with the open space. So he then looked at the common open space phraseology that's in this paragraph. And what I did on the second page, if you want to look at it, that I purposely put my handwriting in there. So he then took the open space of 25% and started to subtract out.
And what are you referring to?
What I passed out.
Pass up.
Did he get all the way
Oh,
up?
there's some ways.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
It stopped me, I apologize.
Sorry, Dan.
No problem. I think there should be enough for Jackie too. Okay, so he then took the 25% open space, which is 8.7 acres, minused out the buffer, steep slope roadways, detention basins, and came up with a net buildable area, or an open space of 18.9. He then took the 38.9 acres of the tract, minus the open space, and came up with a net area of 20 acres. So then using 20 acres and the density that you're allowed, so 27, if you go to the far right in my handwriting, 20 acres divided by 97 lots, that means each lot would be roughly 9,800 square feet. So 8,900 square feet, square root of that is a lot that would be 94 by 94 roughly. Then you apply the front yard, rear yard, and setbacks to that, and you get a buildable envelope of 74 by 64, and I'll leave it to you. So in an area that's 70 by 64, could you put a decent sized house in it?
I don't think so.
So usually a house is about 35 foot square, and sometimes with a,
Not square, but it might be, 40, 45 feet long and 25, 30 feet, 35 width.
but it could fit into 74 by 60.
Okay. Yeah.
Very
yeah,
easily.
Yeah.
In fact, you could probably put 2 houses in there. So with the formula that we're creating in the new ordinance, he could very easily achieve putting 97 lots on that piece of property. That's the way he interpreted it, based on someone reading it fresh without my intervention of what I think your intent was. So if you look at the table here, this first page, so, in the Richmond Estates PRD, under the old PRD, in this MDR district, 98 units were actually installed. With the new ordinance, 97 could be, which is very comparable to what the existing ordinance is. In the one that I developed, it would be 70 would be the max, and a straight subdivision would be 70 units on that. Going down the Blue Run Road, very similar, 47 lots were approved. The new PRD would allow 59 units. The way that I configured it, it would have been 40. The PRD straight subdivision would be 41, very similar to the calculation that I had presented, whatever, 6 months ago. But I'm just pointing out that as you look at the way that it's currently configured and the way that he interpreted the language, this is what he presented to me today.
Okay, I missed something, I was back there blowing my nose. Who's he? Keep
Scott.
he.
Scott,
From your office?
yeah. So like I said, one of my engineers, I just said, here, do a beta test on these 4 developments.
Dan, I think though, I appreciate the work Scott did and what you did on this, but I think the column we ought to pay attention to is your column. Because in no instance shall the density exceed the allowable net density. That's not saying you're gonna get that density. It's saying that's the maximum. You then have to go, as you correctly did in your calculations, you then have to take all the deductions and figure out what basically the net is. So you would only get, in other words, that 97, you'd need a bigger piece of property to get to 97. For the 38.9 acres, once you do the deductions, the 70, I think, is the number that matters.
But if you're going with lots that are only 9,000, so first of all, on a PRD, there is no like minimum or maximum lot size. So you could very easily make lots. We just took the 20 acres, divided it by 97, and just got an average. So you could make lots a lot smaller if your house is only 30 foot square. And to Dan's point, with the mini houses,
Oh, okay.
you could very easily end up with 97 mini houses, because there is no defined lot sizes at a PRD. It all has to do with density. So I guess if you go look at the one that I prepared a long time ago. So what I did on the bottom of table 4A, I put this verbiage: the net available building area for the purpose of calculating the allowable densities shall be calculated based on, and I went through, because right now, there is no definition of allowable net density. So it's up to anybody's interpretation, since there's no definition of it. I know what I think you guys are thinking of, but I think if you wanna proceed, I guess along this path, I would put a paragraph similar to the one that's in the old one, defining exactly what you mean or how to calculate it. Just so that there's no, ambiguities, or, I looked at it this way, he looked at it this way, type of thing. Make sure you get what you want.
Well, I think what we want is to get to the numbers that you have in your next to last column there with the open space deductions.
So what I did there is that in the, instead of playing around with the open space, we just took the area and deleted off the detention basin, and we deleted off the buffer area, and just said, now this is. So it's a way of calculating it a different way, that's all.
And this table is based on, single-family dwellings, right? In other words,
In all cases, yes.
okay.
I have a question, maybe you might know, or Jeff. When was the last time the township had a subdivision that exceeded 10 acres that was a straight subdivision? I can't remember the last one. I know most of this one I can think of would be a Park Place.
Yeah, Park Place was a straight subdivision.
Forest View.
I think that was the last one.
Forest View was a
Forest View would've
straight
been the last
subdivision.
That was before Park Place.
Hidden Falls is a straight sub.
Well, Hidden Falls, they got.
I can't remember whether Hartwood Estates and the Manor.
Hidden Falls was a street.
I know.
Yeah, but they went through kind of a
They had to-
backward way of getting, they got extra lots
Well, they wanted to
approved.
make
and
sure that
should-
they got
should
their
have been
variances
approved
before they
By
went
the
through.
by the zoning board,
Yeah.
so.
But the
It was
last
a
one that I
straight
could,
subdivision.
right, but the last one would
Forest View.
have been Forest View.
But it's just like the plan we discussed tonight. I mean, straight subdivision, they've been able to put 22 single-family residences. By going PRD, they're up to 32, which is almost a 50% increase.
It's actually bigger than that, because that 22 didn't account for roads and.
Yeah, 22 is,
Right.
that's
Probably
wrong.
like 15.
But they
You're
were
just
still
basing that on
had-
a number for a number.
Yeah.
And, I
Unless you have
think,
infrastructure.
you know, right off the bat, we're way too generous with what we're giving. Just because they give a PRD. And you look at the MPC, it makes no reference at all that you have to give more units just because it's a PRD. So, my feeling is that on table 4A, we should start with dwelling units per acre, basically the same as in the straight zoning ordinance, and only allow bonus dwelling units if they do certain things. For instance, if they give us 30% open space instead of 25, they would give them 5% more dwelling units. If they go to 35% or more, we let them go to 10% more. If they put in a picnic area or a playground area, they would give them another 5%. Or if they put in trails, I cut it off at only a 20% increase in the number of dwelling units over a straight subdivision. Because the developer gets a benefit going PRD because less infrastructure he has to put in. Because things can be more compact. So I don't see why we have to give them these big bonus items. And we are giving them because we do allow some types of dwelling units that aren't normally would be allowed in that district, like two-family residences or quad townhouses. So I think we need to limit how many additional dwelling units they can get. At least that's my feeling.
Yeah, there's nothing in the MPC that says
No.
otherwise.
Yeah, but at what point are we turning developers away altogether?
Well, I don't know,
Where's the
I don't know
balancing
what
act?
that point is. I mean, they save money by having less infrastructure. Now, they do have to go through a public hearing. I don't know what I have no idea what a public hearing, typical public hearing costs. Do you? Are we talking 2,000, 3,000? I mean, if that's what it costs, that's minuscule compared to the cost of development.
I don't think the cost of the hearing is significant in the evaluation of their plan. I think that the density is what comes into play and, what those costs. Yeah, Mr. McKeegan's on the other side of the law more than me, but I don't think the cost of the lawyers and the engineers for the public hearing will swing the balance.
Time is what counts.
Right.
Yeah.
Time is what counts. So
But also in my thinking too, some of the things we're saying we can't count for the common open space. I'd eliminate some of those things, cause I don't care if they're in the open space or not. All I'm really concerned about is, we've heard this from our residents numerous times. The open space is always that part they can't build on anyway because it's too steep. So I'd say we should put in some kind of limit, like at least 15% of the open space must be usable for playground or picnic areas, and putting in a shelter or, playground equipment, whatever. I would kind of put it all together in one package.
So can I ask you, Dan, can you go to on your chart, I'm sorry, Dan Slagle.
Yeah, which Dan are you talking about?
The engineer, the end of the road. Can we talk about Hartwood Meadows, which is in a different category, it's in an LDR zone?
Yep.
Was that approved as a subdivision or a PRD?
The last phase was a PRD, the first three phases, weren't they just regular?
Phase 1, 2, and
Straight
3 were
subdivisions.
subdivisions.
They're
Yeah.
subdivisions.
So does the 56.9 acres, is that all phases, or is that just?
No,
part of
that's
it?
phase 4 and 5.
And those were PRDs?
4 and 5 are PRDs, that's, the 57 acres is those two together.
Okay. And that was approved under the old ordinance, which are they single-family dwellings?
They're all single-family dwellings.
Okay.
It was
So
approved
that-
under the current ordinance.
Current ordinance, I shouldn't say old, thank you, Dan, or Jeff. Current ordinance says two, for LDR, single-family dwelling, two
Yes.
dwelling units per acre. And that's what we're saying now, 2 dwelling units per, I'm just trying to compare apples to apples here.
Yep.
So that was approved under the current ordinance at a density of 2 dwelling units per acre, and they ended up having 75 units approved?
Yes.
I believe that was the number.
Okay. And Dan's calculation, Dan Spiegel's calculation, under the proposed ordinance, with all the buffers and open space and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you came up with a number 80?
Yes.
Okay, so they would get a few more units, even though we've added some requirements to them. And if it was a straight subdivision, what does the 52, where did that number come from?
That's what Scott estimated based on a subdivision, or based on the lot size of an LDR in a standard subdivision.
Okay, so that takes into account in some back of the envelope way, roads and things like that.
Yeah, so what, if
Okay.
you looked at this third page, there, you'll see Hartwood Meadows. So what he did was he took the different roadway detention and subtracted that out.
Okay, got it, I see that, yes, thank you, okay. So at least in the LDR, it looks like we're at the very worst, not making it harder on developers to do the PRD. They, in fact, if Mr. Slagle's calculations are correct, may in fact may be making it a little bit better.
Well, I think most developers come in here with a PRD and saying, I can put this number of units on there, but I'm giving you less than that. So
Right.
I'm being a nice guy. I mean, that's their approach.
So if you look at the.
Don't.
You've read my book.
If you look at the last page, which is a handout that I passed out before, if you go back to my old calculation, basically, which is to take the acreage minus the open space and the detention basin, that's the net area basis. And the buffer area, that's subtracting out, in addition to the detention basin, the buffer also. So you can see how in each RE, LDR, and MDR districts, how the current saldo wraps up against the current PRD, the proposed PRD, and then when you start taking out the net area, buffer area type things, of how it impacts the number of lots. But again, this is an old sheet of paper, and just remember, this is based on 10 acres. When you bump that up to 20 acres or 30 acres, you know, it's gonna skew, you're gonna be allowable more density. And maybe what I need to do is to take that sheet and show it as like maybe 30 acres, well, 20, yeah, 20-ish, 20 acres-ish. Because I think the net goal, just to kind of go back where we were probably a year ago, is everybody recognizes and realizes that PRDs, our current PRD ordinance is being effectively utilized by developers to increase the density on these pieces of property. And I think the goal from our supervisors was, and a lot of this was spearheaded by you, Dan, is to get the PRD more in line with what a straight subdivision would be. So get this density over here, let's get it reduced by some formula to get it down to very close to what a straight subdivision would be. And, you know, like I said, there's different ways of skinning a cat, to coin a phrase, but. So,
Yeah, again, the current ordinance allows the developer to effectively double the density when a PRD is used instead of a subdivision.
So, I mean, that's, you know, I've mulled this over for the last couple of months, and that's where I came up and said, why don't we just, starting point be what it would be if it's a straight subdivision? And we ought to give them bonus items when they give us something back. And that something back would be open space, picnic area, playground areas, maybe trails. You know, but I didn't feel we should go more than 20% increase. Cause they're reaping a benefit by having less infrastructure. And hopefully less grading involved because of the topography we're dealing with, because they can fit smaller lots and kind of fit where the flatter areas are and avoid the steeper sloped areas. So, you know, that's where I'm coming from. And I think that would also address a lot of the complaints we've heard over the years from the residents.
So taking, I just wanted to play this out, I may be onto something. Taking the plan we had before us earlier tonight,
Mhm.
22 acres. So what you would say in the LDR is that, okay, the LDR says one unit per acre.
Right.
So this start as a gross 22
22,
would be the number for that.
right,
And if they achieve, I'll pull a number out of the air, 30% open space, and they can get another 4
well,
units.
they were offering us 50%, but I'm saying 35% would be the cutoff, anything above that, we don't give them any
But you would
bonus.
give them a 20% bonus, or?
I would give them a 10% bonus for the extra open
Okay,
space.
so they get 2 more lots.
Now,
Right.
they do have that
Or 2
part
more
of a
units.
trail, that could be considered maybe another 5% for that little bit of trail that connects to the Rachel Carson,
Okay.
possibly. Now, if they could, then we could encourage them to put in a playground area. Like, I think your plan that you live in, they had some basically lots, at least, that these are garden areas.
That's the other thing.
We can't.
Well, eventually you're
Yeah.
supposed to have.
We can't collect the recreation fee and tell them to put in a recreation unit, we can't do both.
Well, setting that aside, I'm just trying, I'm playing out.
But if they have a playground area for their plan, that's fine, and then they don't need to pay into the recreation fee.
Well,
But
the town just-
what Dan's saying is, what if they, obviously, most developers pay the rec fee.
Right.
Well, then they wouldn't get the
And
bonus.
they
then.
don't get the bonus units.
Right, well, they're never, the incentive is not to put a playground in there. They're still gonna pay, they're gonna pay.
Right.
Well, then the key to this, though, to Dan, because Dan's proposal has some merit to it, the key to that is trying to tie the bonuses to what we want them to do.
Right.
And,
Those are things I could think of.
yeah.
Maybe some make sense, maybe some don't.
But keeping that 22 number in mind is probably important, because, okay, you get 20% for this, okay, so that's another 4 units. You get 5% for another playground, okay, so that's another unit, so now you've got 5 more units, now you're up to 27 units, where you could have had probably 15.
Well, the
on a
most they
straight
could do would be a
subdivision.
20%
Oh, you
increase.
cap everything at 20%?
Cap it up 20%. Now, in that case, that would allow them 4.4 units additional. Well, we could round that up to make it 5. I don't care. That part of a unit doesn't matter.
And it would be a benefit to the developer, because in a straight subdivision, as I think Mr. Cooper, when I was talking to him, indicated, if you just did a straight subdivision of that property, you're not gonna get 22 lots out of it.
Right.
You'll be lucky to get
Because
15
of
or
floodplains
17.
and everything else
Yeah.
going on there.
Okay. All right.
But at the same time, some of the stuff that currently would be exempted from the common open space, I think, like wetlands, we can count that in. Steep slopes, we can count that in, as long as we put in so much has to be usable, flat enough that people could use it if they wanted to. You know, it all kind of hopefully ties together to some extent.
Yeah, okay.
And let me just add one more bit of confusion here. So, as I stated at the last meeting, the PRD ordinances lend themselves to larger tracts, 40, 50, 60, 70 acres. And the concept in the old PRD was that you're creating a village, you're creating a standalone community. And that's why in the beginning of the PRD ordinance, it talks about variety. And the variety behind that is that to have a little grocery store inside your PRD, to have a community center with a pool, to have a gas station. I mean, all these things. And because you're creating a standalone community, that was the reason for the buffer, to provide some type a barrier that would distinguish itself from a conventional single-family unit. Every single PRD that has come through this township is not a community here. It's all single-family basically, with the exception of a few. So the question is that why the buffer? Because these aren't like, you know, we're not really encouraging unique construction or houses or anything like that. I mean, it's,
Well, I think the buffer serves like, especially like in Hartwood Meadows case, to make, so it doesn't look different from the rest of the neighborhood that surrounds it. By putting some kind of visual separation in there.
okay.
Now, that may not apply all the cases, and I'm glad you mentioned community center, because that could go in as part of that recreation thing, recreation area, community center, as part of the 5%, you know, whatever. But, yeah, I think, and maybe we need to work that over a little bit, I don't know. But what I'm trying to do is reduce the high volume of units just because they can go with a PRD instead of a straight subdivision. By putting a 20% limit on it. And if they want, the board feels like 25% limit, that's fine with me too. I'm not gonna argue that. We're talking a few units. But we don't want that part of the township, other than the fact the lots are smaller, should not be that much different from any place else in the township. And we do have older sections of the township where the houses are closer together and stuff, so it's, it can fit in.
But that's been a big complaint of the citizens too. They bought in a certain area and all of a sudden there's a development that's completely different than theirs, that's right against them.
Right. We heard a lot of that.
What's the point in having zoning?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have an LDR zone, what does that mean if you come in and build village residential in that area?
Well, like Dan said, in the MPR, the whole thing says you can have commercial development within a PRD. We kind of threw that out years ago. Said, no, we don't want to do that. We only want commercial in zone commercial areas.
I mean, the one that's, I'm sorry, just real quick, is that the one that's down in Verona, they have a wonderful restaurant there. And you're right, they have a commercial zone within inside their village.
Yeah, but then, I mean, unless you're talking about a Treesdale, you're never gonna get that kind of commercial development with a residential
No.
project. You just don't have enough people,
Yeah.
enough rooftops. So Dan, I just wanna push a little bit on your idea, not I'm against it or for it, I just wanna make sure we talk through it. So, if we were if the plan that was before us earlier tonight had been in an MDR district, okay, not an LDR, but MDR, the minimum lot acre is a half acre.
Right.
So under your theory, if that property had been in MDR, you start with 44 units, right? Because that's 0.5 per acre.
Right.
And then you would.
Well, but actually be less because of the floodplain area where they can't actually put a lot.
Well, no, okay, I guess maybe that's my question. When we're putting this together, are we just taking that as a gross calculation? Or are we saying you have to prepare a subdivision, figure out how many lots you could actually get there, and then we'll start adding on to that?
Yeah, I really didn't go into that much detail on it,
All right.
but you make a very good point. You know, if this were a straight subdivision, that's, basically what I'm saying is, the maximum number, starting point would be what you would have if it was straight subdivision. So if
Okay.
you eliminate floodplains and stuff like that, that's gonna reduce the total number of housing units on a.
So again, playing this forward, for a process point, for a PRD application, if we go down this road, the applicant's gonna have to prepare a concept subdivision plan under the normal rules, then show how they meet the PRD requirements, and then show us a plan with the bonus lots added in.
Well, he wouldn't necessarily have to prepare a concept plan, he could just take the parcels, you eliminate floodplains, or maybe the steep slopes you can't build on anyway unless you want to
He's
grade
gonna have to
them.
do some calculations.
But he has to do a little
Yeah,
calculation,
okay.
he says, kind of go, using Dan's term, net buildable area of
Okay.
that parcel of property. That's your starting point, whether it's a straight subdivision or a PRD.
Okay, got it. Got it. And then that gives you a base number, and then if you've met the requirements of the ordinance, you can go
exceed the
20,
requirements, we can
20,
get some
25%,
bonuses,
yeah, okay.
We have a comment from the audience back here.
So on tonight's proposal, it would have been 15 or 16 plus
Right.
20%, which would be
Yes.
maybe 19.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Emily Gowans, 54 Richland Drive. Thank you for letting me pop up. I've got to leave in a few minutes for a kid pickup, so I appreciate letting me speak. I first just wanted to say thank you for all of the really thoughtful comments and time taken in the development of this rewrite. It's been a couple of meetings since I've been able to attend, but I've listened to all of them, so appreciate the recording availability, but really appreciated when I was listening to those, just the thoughtful commentary and just the clarity that a lot of the feedback from the public and from the residents has been heard and is really being taken to heart. So I, for one, just want to say thank you. I wanted to echo something that I've heard many of you say, which I think density really is the key here, and it's been the root of the concern and the issue from the residents' primary concern from the residents' perspective. Subdivisions have some kind of natural built-in limitations, right, based on the geography in this area. And so I bring that up because as we look at the PRDs, and especially if we're looking at potential bonuses, they already have a bonus, if you will, compared to what a straight subdivision would likely allow by way of development, right? Because of how they're able to build. So there is almost a bonus because in a 22-acre lot, you guys were just doing the math, they couldn't actually put all of those in a straight subdivision. So there is almost a bonus element already in play. So I would just ask and encourage us to be really cautious on how much we would be willing to give by way of bonus, because that's on top of the premium they're already getting if they had to just develop a straight subdivision. It's the geographic workarounds that bring me a lot of angst. I live next to a proposed PRD that has very steep slopes, right? And so there's a lot of concerns as they work around that. And that's one of the limitations that a subdivision would provide. So sticking as close as we can to the density of the subdivisions, but taking into account that those also, that bonus is already built in. The other thing that I wanted to call out was that bonuses associated with trails and things like that, some of that is only as good as the developer's word. A lot of that is at the end of the plan. They may come to fruition, they may not be anything entailed. So when it comes to getting additional bonus units for something that, I don't know, I would take a look at some of the latest trails that have been put in places. Is that really worth a couple extra units? From a resident perspective, I don't know that that would warrant bonus units. So maybe looking at that could be helpful in evaluation of some of the potential bonus criteria. And then the last thing, which I will say, which probably won't be very popular, but you know, PRDs are not required. And so if we're really struggling on how to limit or get density closer aligned to what we would achieve with a subdivision, the simplest way would be to not allow PRDs. I know you've put a lot of time and thought into how to rewrite this, so I say that knowing that it probably won't be very popular, but it is an option if we don't feel that there is a way to really keep to the zoning, because zoning should mean something, and I think that's what we're asking for. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Where do we want to go?
Well.
That's a deep subject.
Much as I hate to volunteer, and much as I hate to hold this thing open for another month.
Well, I'd rather hold it open in June.
No, I was I'm kidding with the last remark. Actually, I'm kidding with both remarks. I'm willing to take a shot at some sort of formula, which is where I think we're heading for this density issue, along the lines we've discussed tonight, and see if that brings some clarity to this.
Okay.
But and again, I take the comments seriously. I think where we start is tell us what you can get with this normal subdivision. Show us that you have achieved the goals of the PRD, and in return, we'll give you. And now here's where the number picking comes in. will give you up to 20% more lots, and maybe there needs to be gradations within that, but I think that's what you.
As long as we get something in return.
Yeah.
And, like Mrs. Gowan there, I like PRDs because it preserves the open space and it hopefully cuts down the amount of grading we have to do.
Grading and
in a
tree removal
development.
on a multi-subdivision, you're gonna lose the trees.
Yeah.
That's why you
Yeah.
need
So
to have
that's
PRD
why I
in
think
place.
we need to keep this
It's
PRD.
a balance, it's a
ordinance.
balancing act, I think, yeah.
And, but, not every property should be developed as either a straight subdivision or a PRD, some just aren't workable.
Okay.
And I think, we've addressed some of that in some of our other things like the common open space and the buffer zone by saying it's limited the amount of grading you can do in those areas. They have to stay as natural as possible, so we kind of addressed that part of that. So what do we got here?
And let me just make just another little comment here. But what if we created a different concept with PRDs? In that, getting back to whoever said it first, you make the applicant who wants to go with a PRD come in and to provide a sketch plan, if you will, or a preliminary drawing of the plan as a subdivision, which is basically what that is passing down. And say, okay, you've proven to us that you can put 18 houses on this lot. Now, run with your, now that we know 18, show us your PRD.
That's your starting point.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we're going through a lot of hoops and gyrations and subtract this, add this. And isn't the net goal here is to say, okay, whatever you can do is a straight subdivision? Now, if you look at that little picture that I passed out, where the developer saves money on this, the roads are a lot shorter. Now, Pat Cooper alluded to that when I just came in. The roads are less, the detention facilities may be less, it's less destruction to the area. And because you're only allowed 18, let them put them on quarter-acre lots. I don't really care. The smaller the lot, the more trees that are preserved, the more wetlands, the more streams, the more, you name it, it's all preserved. And in the case of Pennsylvania, he may really have a bastard piece of property that has so much streams and, natural features on it, let me use it that way. But isn't the net goal 18?
As a starting point, unless you give us something else.
And getting, I guess what you guys were alluding to, which I think has merit too, is that, okay, so show us, come with that starting point of 18. Now, if you provide this additional costly little items, a trail, whatever you wanna, that will let you add, you can increase it by 5%. You can increase it by 10%. And I think that's where Kevin's going to at this point.
Right, but we have to we need to
But I
cap
think
it all.
make them go through the exercise of showing that first part of the drawing that I just passed out, and say, because I mean, basically what it is that if we lived in Ohio, if we lived in Florida, where everything is flat, show us what you can do.
I grew up in Ohio, I didn't think it was flat.
It's flat.
You grew up in the wrong part,
But I mean, I think that's the end product, if you wanna look at the goal over here, what the supervisors tasked us with. And this concept that you guys are playing with now completely breaks the mold of all PRDs. It's instead of all these fancy formulas.
How enforceable would it be? I mean, there'll be exceptions to everything. That's the only, that's what I'm hearing and seeing in my mind. Okay, this developer's coming in there and he's, okay, the normal site is 18, well, if we do this, who's gonna be the judge that says, okay, you're gonna give them this bonus here and this bonus there? Is it gonna be easily enforceable or, you creating a job that's even gonna be harder?
I think it's gonna be creating a problem, but
That's what I'm looking at, I'm sorry, I'm a new guy here, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, if has to be a little
I
more.
think it has to be as straightforward in the ordinance as much as possible. You
Yes.
start adding bonuses and numbers, and it's gonna create more confusion. And people are gonna interpret it different, there's gonna be a lot of angst.
No, it's all a
I
matter of
just-
how we write it, because
Correct.
if you write it clearly enough, they can only interpret it one way.
You're right, Dan. I think the only question I would have, you know, is when they're doing the baseline, because of charge, they'd be entitled to variances, or, you know, so that they might be able to say, well, you know, I would have probably gotten a, you know, a variance for this would give me an extra lot and things. You know, you don't know, obviously, you know, the standard for variances are what they are, but, you know, or other things, and then does that mean, well, and then obviously, you know, people are gonna then try to come in for waivers, you know, under the PRD ordinance, does that get there? I just think it's fine, and I really like I mean, who cares what I think, but I mean, just from a legal analysis standpoint, when you say, show me the baseline, do you get to account for that too, or is it strictly, you know, not? And you can rate it any way you want, right, but, you know, from a practical standpoint, it might push people back a little bit towards subdivision, which may not be ideal to consider, no opinion from here.
Well, I think when it comes to determining the baseline, you know, Jeff and Dan are familiar enough with parcels, they can say, you're including stuff that's a floodplain, and that's not allowed under any of our ordinances. You know, so they can help guide that developer to reach the end.
But a lot of these issues, though, we are not gonna know under a pre-app conference. You know, because we're not asking them to go give us engineering plans to talk about what their proposal might be. We might have a baseline map, maybe has topography, maybe sometimes it doesn't. And, you know, we're trying to understand their concept and trying to plug and play. Sometimes we don't know all that information. So how do we come up with that variable number? That's what I'm afraid of with your concept. That's just speaking from my standpoint. We don't have all that information, they're not required to give all that information up front.
Well, maybe we need to require some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I realize this is Indiana Township, but the concept of bonuses is baked pretty hard into the newer parts of the Pittsburgh zoning code, the city of Pittsburgh zoning code. And it doesn't seem to be difficult for either developers in the city or the planning department to administer. I mean, it basically.
You got water, you got.
Yeah, and
Impervious surface.
it basically follows, yeah, I understand, but it basically follows what we're talking about here, you know?
Hold up 1 second, Joe, she's gonna change the tape.
Could you pass back what I passed down?
Oh, sure.
Trying to hold out.
That's okay.
You want all these back?
No,
Just
just
one.
Okay.
Well, Jackie's done it, I passed out what I hope is the final version of
No.
this revision.
No, he didn't. I have questions for you. Don't go on the website yet. Yeah, I would rather have all those maps turned back in.
Okay, pass them back.
This one? Okay.
That's not good.
Yes. Anyway, what I was gonna say, Jeff, to your point, I mean, and we are, I recognize that we're dealing with units and obviously, say you're talking about building size, but, you know, I've had projects in Oakland where the base zoning allows a building of 65 feet tall, but if you can achieve certain standards, LEED, for example, you get a 20% bonus on the height, so now you can go to 70. It's not that, I don't think the concepts are that hard to administer. I think it's a question of language and deciding where the bonuses should be allowed or not allowed.
Yeah, to Michael's point, those decisions can be very subjective.
Yeah.
At
No.
all.
No, and what, I mean, let me throw this out as a decision for purposes of drafting. We do want to encourage, I think we do want to encourage developers to take advantage of the PRD provisions for the reasons we've articulated. So what if we said something like, give us the baseline to be defined, but give us the baseline. If you establish minimum compliance with the PRD, we'll give you an extra 10%. So that would have given, assuming 15 is the number here, maybe another unit. And if you exceed these minimums, then we'll go up to 20%. Is that what you were thinking, Dan?
I don't know if I was actually thinking that. We need to come up with something workable that we can do. And I think, establishing the baseline, the developer tonight came in with a map. It showed a stream length mid-property. Right away, as soon as you have a stream, you know there's a floodplain associated with that stream. So you kind of know what you're deducting. And and you may not know about steep slopes and stuff like that, but you do know at least that.
They knew what they could have gotten.
Right, and, so what if they might have squeeze an extra unit or two in their straight subdivision plan? It's not gonna make that much difference. Because overall, we're gonna be limited on as to how much more they can get. So, if we can be a little bit loose, I don't know if it has to be that exact.
Okay.
So,
But we're not establishing minimum lot sizes. That's the, okay.
no,
That's the
all
thing.
we're establishing is the setbacks on the lot, and let them make the lots as small as they want with those setbacks, because they have to market it. I'm sure you know very much what they can sell in the area and what's not gonna sell. So we don't want a white elephant sitting out there on a 22-acre parcel of land.
Well, I'm glad we're having these discussions because I would like to see PRD stay. It's a nice way to develop, but you're right, we just need to put we need to fine tune what these bonuses are gonna be. Okay. Kevin, you're the master.
But anyway, I think I've covered most of, my concept of this whole thing would be. The only other comment I had on here was on page 6, the buffer area. And, on that, someplace we need to work around the middle of that paragraph, that the buffer area cannot contain a portion of any defined lot. I brought that up in this development tonight.
I think that's easy enough to put in.
Yeah, you squeeze it in there someplace. Probably, where it says no structures may be placed or erected or be a portion of any defined lot. So, and that way the whole thing kind of hangs together.
Could I, as a non-engineer, even though I wanted to be an engineer,
You
but
and I
but
are
that changed my
engineers,
mind.
so you're-
Yeah. In Ridgemont, they had 2 lots that had the retention ponds.
that encroached on it.
How did that happen? You know, I mean,
Look to your right. There you go.
okay.
Yeah, we probably have, I went back, we probably have 5 plants in the township where the lots, facilities are parking.
But going forward, we got one.
I've always strived to get them to have a separate piece of property that's only controlled in the township. So what was finalized on was that it didn't have to be a defined piece of property within the township. It had to be an easement
so I guess we're not gonna finish this tonight. We'll have to put it off till next month. See what Kevin and we can do, to find, hopefully find
Fine-tuning.
something. And in the meantime, if you could send me a draft, I'll read through and see if there's any typos I can catch before we get too far into it.
You have the eye. But I wrote down everything
Since
that you wrote tonight.
Since I don't have to go to work like the rest of you guys every day, I can sit there and read, you know, I get tired of reading magazines.
That's a great idea, Dan, since you're retired, maybe you can deliver my package.
Make me an offer. That brings up our, are we done with this topic then for tonight? Is there anything we can do to help you get the packets out to us sooner, Jeff?
Hit and miss, like I said, I mean, like tomorrow I have 7 inspections and I have an animal cruelty case we're gonna make animals out of my house. So, I mean, that can happen any day, any given day.
Could
Like
I
suggested,
could I
like I
talk to
suggested.
Anderson or even any of the supervisors about maybe they can give you somebody to help on a certain day of the week just to help put the packets together, to get them out?
I don't think if you want them that bad, get them, told you that in the email. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean in that, but, I mean, I try to get them out Friday. When you said, you remember a time when they came out Friday.
Right.
I've been delivering them on Fridays, you know that. But they didn't get out this week, the packets were not ready, and I was off Monday.
Is the submission 2 weeks before the meeting date, is that baked into the ordinance, or is that?
Yes. And we can extend that at some point. We have often talked about that. But I don't care if we extend it to a month, you're still gonna, sometimes you're still gonna wait for the last minute.
Things happen in the office that tie you up and you can't address them together.
That's right.
Whether it's vacation time, illness time,
Or
just
whatever's
too much
going on.
work piling back up. If there's anything we could do to encourage, you know, give you some help to make that happen, we'd be more than happy to.
But getting to Kevin's question is, as a rule of thumb, any subdivision or site plan that comes in, that's a large subdivision, that is, let's say, 4 lots or even less, those should usually get approved with conditions, because I can ferret out a lot of that before you guys see it. The ones that are 5 and over, this is the normal routine. They'll come in, give a presentation, I'll go through the letter, telling everybody what I think is missing. There'll be a lot of back and forth with you guys, and then it's tabled and it comes back at the next meeting. So it gives all of you 30 days to look at it, so.
The problem, though, I think with PRDs, or you correct me if I'm wrong, is that unless the applicant, the way our meeting schedules fall, unless the applicant agrees to an extension, it's almost impossible for us to hold a plan for more than, for 2 meetings.
Yeah,
It just doesn't work out.
Well, and then, once we ask them for a time extension, if they don't agree to it, what happens?
Well, that's my
We
point.
turn it down.
Right.
Way it starts.
And they know that.
Well,
They know that.
And if we turn it down.
We turn it down, that doesn't mean they can't take it
Well,
back to
but
the supervisor.
it goes to
so-
supervisors, they can turn it down, which means they have to start over again, which is when the process of developing a new ordinance, guess what, they fall into the new one instead of the old one.
But whether it's a subdivision or a PRD, anything over 5 lots always gets tabled. It just seems, in site plans, I'm gonna say 80% get tabled, or 30. So that gives you that window to really get into it. Plus, it gives you the information that they provided, that I provided, and now you've got multiple working documents to look at, instead of just looking at it fresh.
Was, so, I don't wanna beat a dead horse, but, the plan that was before us tonight, they gave everything to you 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, we met the deadline.
Okay. All the copies, everything was in 2 weeks ago?
Of the plan,
Of
yes.
the plan. But, Dan's letter wasn't done until quite
Monday.
recently, correct?
Monday.
Monday, okay.
Or did it come in late Friday? Hey, did it come in late Friday? But I had packets
September 20th.
September 20th.
Well, why don't-
May I make this suggestion? I appreciate Dan's comments and letters, and I do read them and rely on them, but it would be helpful to me if, even if I just had a plan to look at, so maybe you could just call us when you have a plan and we can come in.
Or send an
Yeah.
email out if you know you're not gonna get it out by Friday, and then we have the option to stop in and pick it up.
Well, the plans are always gonna be here 2 weeks prior to the meeting. But Dan's letter's gonna be 4 out.
Understood.
I mean, but at least,
But at least
I
we'll have
said
the
that in
plan.
the email,
We'll
at
have
least
the
you're looking
plan.
at a
We'll
plan.
have the plan in the application, we can start looking at that.
Yeah, we
Okay.
certainly can do that, and we're also looking into, what can we do electronic? You know, require that of the applicants to get electronic, and shoot pay that
My
way.
computer screen's not big enough to look at the plan on it, so.
They just have to zoom in and scroll around.
No.
Very hard to tell.
We don't do that.
That's great.
I'm an old retiree, remember that. Okay, is there anything else we need to discuss this evening?
Is it possible to comment on the,
You have the public, that would like.
okay, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. I just had a couple questions, regarding, I love the idea, that's really innovative. And what you shared about downtown Pittsburgh saying, if the buildings are LEED certified, that was also something, not LEED, but just the environmental impact was something that was really, talked about a lot, along with the densities. So maybe if we could bake in some of those as possible bonuses, especially since the plan that was just presented tonight, they're gonna be disturbing 78% of that lot, and it feels to me, we've discussed that PRDs disturb less, but 78% feels like an awful lot, you know, if we can be more clear, like, that it's not just open space, but that it's undeveloped space. I think that would be really, really helpful, so, great ideas.
Yeah, we've addressed that with the new code we're working on. Unfortunately, the old one didn't have any reference to not disturbing those areas. So we can't do it. Thank you. Okay. Hearing nothing else, somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Peter, second by Kevin. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.